darkness in the underground subway. My name is Danny, and I'm 22 years old. This is the most horrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City, but I don't own a car, so my main mode of transport is the subway. It was a Saturday night, and I was on my way home after a midnight party. I had done this nearly every weekend, so I was used to riding the subway alone at such hours. As I descended the stairs into the tunnel, a chilling atmosphere enveloped me. The station was eerily empty, the silence heightening my senses. I could almost feel eyes on me, a prickling sensation making my heart race. Occasional clanging echoed from an unseen spot, adding to my unease. I arrived early for the train, so I sat on a long bench waiting, trying to shake off the shivers. Just then, I heard a voice, low and gravelly, cutting through the silence. "I'm here, buddy." I looked up and froze. Standing on the tracks in the tunnel was a scruffy man, probably in his 40s. He smiled at me, a creepy grin with at least 3 missing teeth. I started to feel anxious and unsettled. I tried to look away, focusing on my phone, but the man wouldn't leave. Then, suddenly, the man emerged from the darkness, poking his head out of the tunnel, wearing that unsettling grin like the first man. "Come play with us," he called, his voice slurring as if he were drunk. The way they stared at me was unsettling, their eyes locked onto mine as if trying to pull me into some terrible mystery. I kept trying to ignore them, my heart racing with anxiety as I waited for the train. But my gaze caught the man moving deeper into the tunnel. Suddenly, moments later, he turned back, pulling out a syringe, brandishing it menacingly towards me. The gleaming tip caught the dim light of the station, and I felt myself plummeting into terror. He began to taunt, his voice dripping with malice. I could see the madness in his eyes, a kind of insanity. Panic surged within me, and I realized I needed to act fast. Instinct kicked in, and I scanned the area for an escape route. I yelled for him to stay away, my voice barely cutting through the tension in the air. The man stepped closer, his eyes wild and unblinking. "Now you're in my territory, kid." My breath quickened as the train was still a few minutes away. His cackling laughter sent chills down my spine. I glanced at the approaching train's headlights, hope swelling within me, but the man raised the syringe higher, waving it before me mockingly, threateningly. He pointed back toward the tunnel, as if inviting me into a nightmare I didn't want to step into. "You think that train can save you?" Panic churned within me. I scanned the area, realizing I needed to create some distance. In a split-second decision, I lunged to the right, grabbing a metal bar leaning against the corner of the wall. The man lunged at me, and in that moment, I swung the metal bar with all my might. It struck his shoulder, causing him to stagger back. I could see the rage in his eyes as he steadied himself, but the syringe was still raised as he growled, "You will regret this," and charged at me again. This time, I ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the needle. I thought it best to evade this danger and ran towards the edge of the platform, desperately hoping the train would arrive soon. I decided I had to run. Just as I turned to dash toward the edge of the platform, the man lunged at me, but I was faster. I sprinted toward the train, my heart racing as I jumped aboard just as it came to a stop. I stumbled into the first car, panting heavily. I turned to see the conductor staring at me, concern etched on his face. "There's a man down there. He has a syringe," I yelled, fear and urgency spilling from my lips. The conductor quickly dialed for help, his expression shifting from worry to panic as he listened to me. I felt my heart race as the train began to move, pulling me away from the nightmare behind. When we reached the stop, I jumped off the train and hurried up to the street. I glanced back at the platform one last time, hoping he was gone. Since that night, I've avoided the subway at all costs. I even attended a party at a friend's house, opting to walk a long distance to the next station rather than risk going to that terrifying place again. As I replayed the events in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was dealing with more than just a madman that night. The encounter left me paranoid, my mind racing with hypotheticals. What if he followed me home? What if he was still out there, waiting for his next victim? Each late-night trip became a new test of my courage. In the silence of my apartment, I knew I would never fully escape the memories of that night. One night, weeks later, I passed that very subway station. As I approached the entrance, a figure stepped out from the shadows, a tall, menacing shape holding something in its hand. But then, I realized it wasn't him. It was just a weary man collecting trash from the platform. I tried to rein in my fear until I spotted him on the wanted poster on the subway station bulletin board, the very same conductor who had helped me call for help as I escaped his pursuit. I realized that sometimes the greatest fear isn't the threat itself, but the unpredictable nature of people. You never know who might be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the moment to strike. I always believed that evil would be punished by the law, and I would always need to stay vigilant because the line between safety and danger is very thin in this world. The ghost house in the forest. His name was Lucas. It all happened during a hiking trip 3 years ago. He always loved spending time in nature, and he had gone hiking near the White Mountains of Utah. Whenever he went hiking, the surrounding nature was so breathtaking that Lucas lost track of time. Realizing the sun was setting, Lucas felt a bit hungry and sat under a nearby tree. Since he still had plenty of time to get down the hill, he decided to eat first to regain some energy. But today, it seemed to be getting dark unusually fast. He took out his flashlight and shined it ahead just as a massive bolt of lightning struck in the distance. Looking up at the sky, he noticed dark clouds gathering, ready to pour down at any moment. Feeling a bit anxious now, he quickened his pace. The dark clouds rumbled above, and the wind picked up speed through the forest. After 15 minutes, large raindrops started falling. The heavy raindrops almost felt like they were piercing his skin. Lucas started running, but his foot got caught in a hole, causing him to stumble and fall. Soon, his flashlight stopped working, plunging him into near total darkness. Frightened, he somehow managed to get back on his feet. But after walking for another 10 minutes, he realized he was hopelessly lost. He checked his watch. It was 8 p.m. He should have been off the hill by now, but things kept getting worse. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He climbed the tallest tree nearby, pulled out his binoculars, and scanned as far as he could. Lucas spotted a yellow light in the distance, on the left side of the forest. He zoomed in and saw a cabin standing there. Without hesitation, he climbed down the tree and started running toward it. Desperate to survive the night, he reached the cabin, panting heavily. Knocking on the door, he called out,
"Is anyone there? Please, open up."
At that moment, he was nearly in tears. Then, the door creaked loudly and finally opened. A man opened the door and smiled, saying,
"Dear Lord, what happened to you? Please, come in."
Without hesitation, Lucas stepped inside. The cabin was old and somewhat rusty, with a small fireplace in the center. After a while, a woman entered the room. She looked weary and sorrowful. The man explained that she had been suffering from a chronic illness for a long time. She gave him an eerie smile and then mentioned her son, Jimmy. She said he was a mischievous boy who always drove her into fits of rage. Lucas forced a weak smile in response. As he looked around, he found it both surprising and strange that they lived in such isolation. There was no sign of a vehicle nearby. Lucas wondered how they managed their daily lives. Perhaps they were just accustomed to this way of living. The man led Lucas to the guest bedroom at the end of a narrow hallway and told him he should lock the door for safety, as his son Jimmy could sometimes be a bit mischievous at night. Lucas lay down, drained of energy, hoping the storm would pass while he slept. But then he heard it, a soft giggle in the darkness, a child's voice, whispering and laughing in the shadows. He had forgotten to lock the door. Lucas sat up in bed, taking a few seconds to adjust to the room's darkness.
Jimmy?
He remembered the woman mentioning her son, but something about her words had felt off. Pale moonlight streamed through the window. Lucas saw a young boy, around 10 years old, standing near the window, his back facing him. But when the boy turned to face Lucas, his heart skipped a beat. The boy's eyes were completely white, sunken, unblinking. They were the only thing Lucas could see. He asked,
Who are you?
but the boy just giggled and ran out of the room. Lucas couldn't fully grasp the horror of it yet, but unease crept into his chest. Panicked, he turned on the light and searched for his backpack. But as he looked around, he realized the room was not as it had been before. The surfaces were covered in dust and cobwebs, as if it had been abandoned for years. Terrified, he decided to leave immediately rather than wait until morning. As he turned to leave, he glanced back and they were there, standing in the doorway, staring at him with hollow eyes and sinister grins. A chilling, unnatural laughter echoed in his mind, paralyzing him with fear. Lucas bolted into the forest, but somehow he tripped and lost consciousness among the trees. When he woke up, he found himself in a hospital, his body aching and covered in wounds. A police officer approached him, asking about what had happened. Lucas recounted everything: the house, the strange family. The officer was silent for a moment before explaining that the house Lucas had described had been abandoned for years. No one had lived there for a long time. A family had once lived there, but their son had died after being attacked by a strange creature in the woods. Stricken with grief, the couple had also perished in that very house. Lucas struggled to accept what had happened. He realized that the family he had met were not living people. They were ghosts, their soulless white eyes and empty smiles haunting his memory. He now understood that he had survived a night of pure terror. Secrets hidden in the basement. Leo, a college student desperate to find a job during his winter break, stumbled upon a strange ad on Craigslist. The ad lacked details, but the salary was too good to pass up for a simple housekeeping job at the home of an elderly woman named Mrs. Donovan. At the end of the ad, there was a phone number. An elderly woman answered the call and gave him an address to visit the next day. The next day, Leo arrived at Mrs. Donovan's house, a peculiar old wooden house surrounded by a vast garden of towering red roses. Their charcoal black stems stood out against the vibrant petals. Mrs. Donovan warmly welcomed him, an elderly woman with sharp gray eyes and an air of mystery. She gave him a tour of the large house, filled with books on botany and strange plants. Her library was vast, and there was something about those books that made him feel uneasy. Then she led Leo out to the garden, full of strange plants, especially the roses he had noticed earlier. She began praising the roses as the work of her life and gave him detailed instructions on how to care for the garden. Inside, she offered Leo a cup of coffee and instructed him on some tasks around the house while she was out. She said,
"Everything must be cared for as it is when I leave. Just tend to the plants. One rule, don't go into the basement."
At first, Leo found her expression a bit odd, though nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Many people have restrictions on certain rooms in their homes. His curiosity was piqued, but soon set aside. After Mrs. Donovan left, he spent the next few hours tending to the plants, ensuring each was watered and cared for properly. Leo took a deep breath and noticed something odd. The scent of the flowers was overpowering, almost metallic. Moreover, the rose petals were much thicker than a typical rose. Just then, a bee buzzed past Leo's head, startling him as he grabbed a rose. The red petals crumbled in his hand, but something was strange. His hand felt slick and sticky. Leo opened his palm. A thick red liquid oozed from the broken petals, staining his hand. It was unlike any flower Leo had ever seen. It looked like blood. Shuddering, Leo rushed back inside to wash his hands. Suddenly, he heard an echoing noise from the basement. It grew louder, like a cry for help. Despite Mrs. Donovan's strict instructions, curiosity and concern drove Leo to the basement door. He descended the stairs, the faint light from his phone illuminating a metal door hidden at the end of the hallway. A faint whimper sent chills down his spine. Something was terribly wrong behind that door. With trembling hands, he pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room. Iron cages lined the walls. From one of them, he heard a faint plea for help.
Help me.
Then he saw her, a young woman curled up in the corner of a cage, her pale face covered in scratches, her body showing signs of severe malnutrition. Leo was shocked and horrified. The woman explained that Mrs. Donovan had kept her imprisoned and fed her body to her monstrous plants. Just as he began planning her rescue, he heard the front door open. Mrs. Donovan had returned unexpectedly. As she entered, dragging a large suitcase behind her, Leo tried to remain calm, pretending everything was normal. She squinted, tilting her head as she studied him.
You look pale. Are you okay?
Mrs. Donovan's smile vanished. Her gaze shifted toward the basement door, then back to Leo.
You went somewhere you shouldn't have, didn't you?
Mrs. Donovan suddenly grabbed a pruning knife from her suitcase and slashed at Leo. He dodged, the blade striking wood and splintering it. Leo shoved a chair forward, knocking her off balance, then sprinted toward the basement, slamming the door behind him and locking it with a rusty latch. Leo reached for his phone but realized it was missing. Panic surged within him. Then he remembered the landline phone in the kitchen. He needed to get there without being caught by Mrs. Donovan. Leo spotted a broom and an old coat in the corner of the basement. Quickly, he propped the broom against the wall, draped the coat over it to mimic a human figure, then grabbed a pipe from the floor and hurled it against the wall to create a loud noise. The distraction worked. As she stormed through the door, it gave Leo just enough time to slip into the kitchen. He dashed to the phone, grabbed the landline, and dialed 911 with trembling hands. She realized and quickly returned. Leo grabbed a pan from the counter and struck her arm, causing the knife to drop to the floor.
Help. She's trying to kill me.
Leo screamed into the phone, his voice desperate. Leo dodged, grabbed a bottle of fertilizer from the counter, and hurled it into her face. The powder temporarily blinded her, giving Leo a chance to grab the knife and point it at her. Her wild grin sent shivers down his spine. The front door burst open, and police stormed in. Mrs. Donovan lunged desperately at Leo, but the officers tackled her to the ground and restrained her. Shortly after, her garden was destroyed and burned to ashes by authorities. They uncovered the horrifying truth about Mrs. Donovan's experiments with carnivorous plants that thrived on blood and human flesh. The truth about her dark experiments was revealed. She was sent to a mental institution where she would spend the rest of her life. This nightmare was something Leo would never forget. The obsession of the stalker. It was 2 years ago. I worked the night shift from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. The store was located on a secluded road in a quiet rural area. Few people came during those hours. mostly regulars stopping by for beer or snacks. On a typical night, I could expect 10 to 20 customers. It was an ordinary job, the kind you do to make a living, and I never anticipated anything out of the ordinary. Then, one evening, around midnight, a man walked in. He was probably in his 30s. At first, he seemed normal, and nothing unusual happened. But then, he started making strange noises, loud, uncontrolled yells. At first, I thought he might have a mental disability or be unwell. My brother has a similar condition, so I felt some sympathy for him. He didn't come to the counter like most customers. Instead, he stood there, staring at the ceiling, his eyes fixed on some distant point above, making unsettling noises. I felt uneasy, unsure how to handle the situation. I tried talking to him, but he only continued making those incomprehensible, strange sounds. I kept checking outside to see if he had come with anyone, but the parking lot was empty. It seemed he had walked here from somewhere unknown. He stood there for so long, staring at the ceiling and making noises that I finally tried to get him out by handing him a bag of chips and saying, "You can go now." He didn't seem to care, lost in his own world. But then, suddenly he turned and walked out of the store. I felt an odd mix of relief and fear. The man was strange, but at least he was gone. About an hour later, the phone rang. I picked it up, but the moment I heard the same loud yell as before, I froze. It was him again. I slammed the phone down, unsure what to think. I started checking outside. Every little noise startled me, and I kept looking outside until 4 a.m. when my replacement finally arrived. My shift was over, and I was allowed to go home. I left the store as quickly as I could and went home. I threw my stuff on the table, ready to go to bed. But then, less than a minute after I walked in the door, the phone rang again. A chill ran down my spine. Who could be calling at 4 a.m.? I braced myself for the worst. It was him again, those unmistakable screams. Quickly hanging up, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I drew the curtains, locked the doors, and refused to sleep until morning. During a night camera check, I saw him standing in a dark corner, just a few meters from my door, holding a knife and grinning eerily. Terrified, I thought about moving somewhere else. The next day, I went back to my night shift. While checking the stockroom, a sudden blow to the head knocked me down. Pain seared through me as everything went black. When I woke up, I found myself tightly tied to an old chair with rope in the store's stockroom. Before I could process what was happening, he stood before me, his haunted eyes glaring as he screamed about my brother.
He was always loved and cared for. What about me? I was abandoned, treated like trash.
He pulled out a knife and stepped closer, his face twisted with jealous rage. Realizing I couldn't escape by force, I knew I had to manipulate him psychologically and began talking to him. "Maybe you're right. I can't understand your pain, but I can help." He hesitated, his eyes flashing with a glimmer of hope. "I know you just want someone to understand you, don't you? If you untie me, I'll do whatever you want." He untied me but kept the knife in hand. I told him there was a surprise if he let me blindfold him. Using a piece of cloth from the stockroom, I blindfolded him. Quickly, I used the rope to tie him to the chair. When he realized what was happening, he began struggling violently. Keeping a safe distance, I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't let you hurt anyone else. I'll come back with help." I left, shut the stockroom door, and quickly called the police, leading them to the scene. Before they took him away, I told him, "I can't fully understand what you've been through, but I know you're not a bad person." He looked at me with eyes full of pain and inner conflict. Then he broke into tears. The police took him away, saying they would take him to a better treatment facility. I hoped my words had planted a seed of change in his mind. Back home, I found notes detailing my habits, like Nico returns at 4:15 a.m., turns on the living room light at 4:18 a.m. This proved he had been watching me for a long time. But now, it was finally over. Months later, I received a letter from a mental health center. It was a short note from him, thanking me. I felt a wave of relief. I decided to move to a new place, start a new job, and live a more peaceful life. Though I occasionally think about what happened, I no longer feel afraid. The kidnapper's scary plan. Lily was on her way home from her best friend Emma's house. Emma's house was on a hill, and despite Emma urging Lily to stay over, she decided to head home. It was only 7:30 p.m., and she decided to take the bus. At the nearby bus stop, she arrived and saw a man already sitting there. He looked a bit strange, appearing to be homeless. The man's unsettling presence made Lily uncomfortable. She decided to keep her distance and stood there with a serious expression. Emma called her to ask if she had boarded the bus yet. Lily talked to her for a while, trying to ease the discomfort caused by the man's presence. Despite trying to ignore him, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that the man was watching her. Every 5 to 10 seconds, he would take out his phone and appear busy texting. After ending the call, Lily glanced at her phone. It was 7:45 p.m., and her battery was down to 10%. She sighed, annoyed that she hadn't charged it earlier. She stared at the long, empty highway, but there was no sign of the bus. She felt uneasy being alone with the strange man. Then the man stood up from his seat and started walking toward Lily. She looked away, trying to focus on her phone screen as he approached her.
Hey, got a lighter?
Without looking up, Lily curtly replied.
I don't smoke.
She could hear him moving behind her, but didn't dare to turn around. A moment later, she turned around, and he was standing right in front of her. His eyes stared at her vacantly, and his smile was eerie, grotesque.
Are you sure? All girls pretend they don't like attention, but they all love it.
Leave me alone.
She yelled loudly, threatening that if he didn't back off, she would scream and call the police, warning him that her friend's house was nearby and her friend's dad owned a gun. His smile vanished, and she thought she was safe. Then headlights appeared as a car pulled up, driven by an older woman who offered Lily a ride. Surprised but not hesitating, Lily seized the chance to escape the unsettling situation. She quickly got into the car without a second thought, leaving the man behind. As the car drove away, Lily saw the man smiling in the rearview mirror, and his expression sent chills down her spine. They drove off, and the woman smiled as Lily thanked her. But her friendly demeanor seemed odd when she turned to Lily and said,
Women need to be careful these days. You never know when you'll walk into a trap.
The woman drove slowly along the dark highway. After a while, they stopped at a deserted gas station parking lot. Lily watched the woman step out and shut the car door behind her. Lily wanted to call her parents to let them know, but she remembered her phone was dead. Just then, a ringtone sounded, and her eyes fell on a phone lying casually on the dashboard. She thought the woman must have forgotten it. She cautiously reached out to grab it. The phone unlocked without needing a password. At that moment, a wave of dread washed over her. The phone's wallpaper flashed on the screen, showing a picture of the woman standing next to a man. He was the same man Lily had seen at the bus stop. Somehow, they were connected. Panicked, she quickly grabbed the phone and slipped out of the car, but not fast enough. The woman returned, her kind expression gone, blocking the door.
Where do you think you're going, girl?
Lily stumbled, slipping through the driver's side door to get out. As she escaped, the woman circled around the back of the car. brandishing a knife to block her path. The woman lunged at her, and instinctively, Lily raised her arm to shield herself, causing the blade to slice painfully across her skin. Lily turned to run, but the woman grabbed her hair and yanked her back. Lily screamed, twisting and clawing at her hand. Blood dripped down her arm, her strength fading from the injury. But then, a surge of survival instinct kicked in. Lily stomped and kicked at the woman's shin, making her stumble and giving Lily a brief chance to escape. As Lily sprinted toward the road, headlights appeared in the distance. It was a truck. Desperate, she waved frantically, hoping they would stop. The truck slowed down as they saw her. The woman stood just behind her and yelled,
She's stealing from me. Stop her.
A man stepped out. Lily could only cry out.
She's lying. She tried to kidnap me.
He hesitated, but the sight of Lily's bleeding arm seemed to convince him. She quickly got into his truck, and they headed to the police station. Luckily, she had evidence, her phone. It was a treasure trove of proof. They were kidnappers preying on women and children. They had a twisted scheme. The man would harass women, and the woman would pretend to be a savior. Once inside the car, the victim had no escape. Luckily, Lily avoided becoming their next victim. Months later, she still thought about that night. Since then, Lily had bought a car and vowed never to take public transportation alone at night again. Intruder from the garage. It was just another long, dull day at school, but as I walked home, the excitement of Friday lightened my mood. No school tomorrow, I could finally relax. As I approached my house, I noticed something odd. The garage door was wide open, and the light inside was still on. My dad had left earlier that day for a business trip, so he must have been in a hurry and forgot to close it. I didn't think much of it at the time. I stepped into the garage, turned off the light, and pulled the door shut. The quiet of the house greeted me as I stepped inside, and the thought of having the entire place to myself made me feel free. My mom had gone to a friend's house for the evening, so I was all set for a night of gaming and movies. Hours passed as I got lost in my game. The house was silent, except for the occasional sounds from the TV. I decided to grab a drink, and as I walked into the kitchen, something caught my attention. The garage light was on again. I froze, a strange, eerie feeling creeping over me. Did I forget to turn it off? Or had my mom come back? But I didn't hear her come in. My heart began to race as I approached the garage door, my steps growing heavier. The moment I stepped into the garage, I saw that every drawer in my dad's workshop area was open. His tools were scattered across the floor, as if someone had been frantically searching for something. But no one was there. I hurried back inside, locking the garage door behind me. Something was wrong. I could feel it. I started heading back to the living room, planning to watch TV and try to calm myself down. Then, from behind me, I heard the garage door handle rattling violently. I froze, staring at the door, watching it shake harder and harder, as if someone on the other side was desperately trying to get in. I grabbed my phone, my hands trembling, as I realized I needed to get out of the house. In my panic, I didn't notice that the noise had suddenly stopped. The silence was eerie, too silent. I ran straight for the front door, my only thought being to escape. But as I entered the living room, I froze in my tracks. Someone was there, a large man, his back turned to me. In his hand, he gripped an axe tightly. It must have been taken from my dad's workshop. I held my breath, terrified that he would turn around and see me. The TV was still playing, masking my footsteps, and I knew this was my only chance. Going upstairs was not an option. I quietly turned back and headed for the back door, trying to stay calm. Once outside, I didn't stop running. I hurried across to my neighbor's house. Panicked, I banged on their door until they let me in. I waited there, staring at my house from across the street, praying the intruder wouldn't come looking for me. I pounded on my neighbor's door, and it felt like hours before Mr. Thompson finally opened it, his face etched with confusion. I told him everything that had happened. Mr. Thompson, a retired firefighter with a strong sense of duty, grabbed a flashlight and an old baseball bat. He assured me he would check the house and that everything would be fine. Reluctantly, I stayed behind, watching him cross the street. My body was still shaking with fear. My anxiety grew as I watched, unable to shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I had called the police. They were on their way, but the thought of that man in my house, wielding my dad's axe, haunted me. I watched as Mr. Thompson cautiously approached the front door, shining his flashlight across the windows and garage. He disappeared inside. I strained to listen for anything, but everything was eerily silent. Suddenly, I saw him step outside. From across the street, his voice echoed faintly. "There's no one in there. The house is empty." A wave of relief washed over me, but I knew I still needed to stay cautious. As Mr. Thompson began walking back toward me, that gnawing sense of unease returned. Before I could voice my concern, a shadow moved behind him. My blood ran cold. The intruder. He was there, emerging from the dark side of the house, the axe glinting faintly under the porch light. I screamed, trying to warn Mr. Thompson, but it was too late. As he turned, the man lunged at him. A fierce struggle broke out. Mr. Thompson swung the baseball bat, but the intruder was strong. The two grappled, the axe coming dangerously close to Mr. Thompson's head as they stumbled across the lawn. My legs wouldn't move, paralyzed with fear, as I watched the horrifying scene unfold. Each second felt like a nightmare. Mr. Thompson managed a strong swing with the bat, striking the man's ribs, but it wasn't enough. The intruder roared in pain, but instead of retreating, he raised the axe, ready to strike. Just as the axe came down, Mr. Thompson threw himself to the side, narrowly dodging the blow. In that brief moment of distraction, Mr. Thompson delivered another blow, knocking the man off balance. I finally decided to rush forward to help, but before I could reach them, the sound of police sirens echoed in the air. He looked up at the sound of the sirens and, using his last ounce of strength, bolted toward the backyard. Mr. Thompson staggered to his feet, gasping for air but still steady. The police arrived just in time, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they chased after the man. Within minutes, they subdued him. The man thrashed violently, growling like a wild animal, but the police swiftly restrained him, hitting him to the ground and cuffing his hands behind his back. I stood there, trembling, watching the entire scene unfold. Mr. Thompson approached me, clutching his side where he had been hit, but still managing a smile. "It's safe now," he said. I felt an overwhelming gratitude for being saved. I recounted every detail I could remember to the police, but all I wanted was to forget. I sat down on the steps of Mr. Thompson's porch, my body trembling, watching the man sitting in the back of the police car as it drove away. It was over, but the image of the intruder's face, his crazed eyes, and the sound of the axe slicing through the air would haunt me forever. Mr. Thompson sat next to me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, kid," he said softly. "It's over now." But deep down, I knew the fear would stay with me. I would never forget how close I came to being caught in the grip of something truly evil. The stalker in the forest. The sun barely peeked through the dense pine trees as I drove north, my truck loaded with skiing gear and camping supplies. This time, my friend Leo and I had planned a skiing trip in a remote area, miles away from any ski resort. After a few hours of driving, I parked my truck at the base of an area that looked decent with several hills, but I stopped there because I really couldn't drive any further due to the trees. Leo and I unloaded our gear, struggling to walk a quarter-mile to a clearing where we set up camp. It was an incredible amount of work with all the stuff we had to carry. In a small clearing among the trees, we pitched the tent, laid out our sleeping bags, and organized our gear. After setting up camp, we began hiking up the hill, carrying our snowboards and keeping an eye on the steep slopes. The ascent was quite challenging, but I felt thrilled as we climbed higher. We snowboarded down several slopes, one after the other. But as I neared the bottom of a slope, I lost sight of Leo. I assumed we'd meet at the base or regroup at camp. It wasn't unusual for us to take different paths down the hill. I called him on the radio, but all I got was static. Maybe he was still skiing and had started down alone. My eyes scanned the trees for any sign of him. When I reached the base of the hill, I walked and spotted another figure emerging from the woods. A skier, wearing a mask and dressed in layers. He approached me, seeming friendly beneath the ski mask, asking where the best hills were and if we were camping. He explained that he and his wife were looking for a good place to camp near others and asked if I could lead him to my campsite, though I really didn't want to. I pulled out the radio again, calling Leo to let him know I would be heading back to camp soon. The device crackled, a distorted noise cutting in, but there was no response from him at all. Then the man started following me, his presence behind me making me feel uneasy. Suddenly, I started hearing static from the other end of the radio, as if someone was trying to talk to me but couldn't connect. When we finally reached the tent, something felt off. I realized I hadn't seen his wife, so I asked where she was. He didn't respond. Instead, he moved closer, his movements becoming increasingly strange. But for some reason, something about his snowboard and backpack caught my attention. They felt familiar. Gray, bright orange. The snowboards tightly strapped on either side. My mind raced as I remembered. Leo had the exact same ones. For a few seconds, I thought Leo was pranking me. But no, the voice was too different. He stepped within inches of me, revealing his real face and grinning maliciously. This was not Leo. Panic surged as I backed away, stumbling into the tent. I rifled through the backpack, my fingers fumbling for the flare gun. Just as I grasped it, the man grabbed my foot sticking out of the tent. Then I suddenly felt a sharp pain in my leg. A severe tingling sensation in my leg felt like a strong electric shock, burning, and I screamed in pain. I glanced down and saw a knife embedded deep in my thigh. A scream tore from me as I grabbed the flare gun. He stepped back, but I didn't lower the weapon. I aimed directly at him. Blood oozed from my wound, staining the snow beneath me. I demanded to know where my friend was. The man's voice was calm, almost mocking, as he told me Leo was lying near the foot of the slope where we had been skiing. His words sent chills down my spine. He turned and sauntered away, disappearing into the darkness of the woods before I could fire a shot. My vision blurred from the pain, but I pressed down on my leg, trying to staunch the bleeding while I grabbed my phone and called 911. Just as I began to lose hope, a distant noise reached my ears. A rescue helicopter illuminated the snow-covered hills. With the little strength I had left, I fired the flare gun, the red light bursting into the sky. I mustered all my strength to tell them about Leo. He was found lying motionless on the hillside, his face pale. Blood stained his pants and the snow beneath him. A few days later, we were both recovering in the hospital, our wounds stitched up, but the memories remained vivid. We learned that our attacker was wanted for multiple assaults in remote areas, always hunting those who wandered too far from safety. Rain pounded against the windshield as I drove down a deserted highway, my headlights barely piercing through the torrential downpour. I was a solitary traveler, accustomed to nights like this, navigating strange roads in search of new experiences. As I saw a sign emerge from the darkness, "Welcome to Cottage City," a wave of relief washed over me. Shelter was near. I pressed on, hoping the town would offer some respite from the storm. I drove slowly through the quiet streets. The town felt almost frozen in time. One house caught my eye, a crumbling structure by the roadside, abandoned and eerie. The walls were spray, painted with words like "Keep Out, Demon," and "Don't Look Back." Wooden crosses were haphazardly nailed to the porch and gate, as if someone was trying to ward off something within. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over and stepped out into the rain, turning on my flashlight. I stood outside, the light catching the faded words, and when I shone the beam toward the house, I froze. In the upstairs window, a boy stood staring down at me. His face was pale, with dark circles under his red, swollen eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. He didn't move, just gazed at me with an empty stare. I shivered and called out, "Hey, are you here alone, boy? Do you need help?" I mentioned that I was looking for a place to stay. The boy tilted his head, his expression unchanged, but his gaze seemed to pierce through me, questioning why I was there and suggesting I shouldn't be in this place. He began to speak. "Are you here to meet her?" It was an odd question, one that filled me with dread. I thought this place was abandoned. I asked why he was here alone and where she was. Then, inexplicably, he broke into a strange smile and told me, "Her? She's waiting for a replacement." His gaze shifted to something behind me, his expression turning to one of horror. A strong wind blew through, rattling the doors of the old house. Then suddenly, a hand touched me from behind. I turned around to see a creepy old man standing behind me with a lantern, his bewildered face wondering why I was standing in front of this abandoned house. I stammered, explaining that I was just a traveler, seeking shelter from the storm. I told him about the boy I had seen in the window, but he insisted that I must have imagined it, even though I knew what I had seen. I learned that the nearest hotel was still an hour's drive away, and he told me that if I wanted, I could stay overnight at his house. He made me feel strange, yet I accepted his invitation. It was hard to fathom that the boy I had seen in the abandoned house was just my imagination. But something told me this man knew more than he let on. The old man's house looked as ancient as its exterior. The furniture was old, the walls covered with dusty bookshelves and faded photographs. He led me to a seat by the fireplace. Finally, I mustered the courage to ask him about the house. He told me that many years ago, he moved here with his father. There weren't many children in the neighborhood, so he quickly made friends with a boy named Roland. Roland's family was large and boisterous, always filled with laughter. Roland's aunt, a warm woman, always had candy for the children, especially for him. But one day, she passed away suddenly. The whole family was grief-stricken, everyone except Roland. He didn't shed a single tear, didn't say a word. He just stood at her funeral, frozen and silent, his eyes vacant even as they lowered her into the ground. He had changed since that day, hardly going outside and spending hours alone in his room. Ronald was always in his room with his Ouija board. He used to say his aunt had taught him to use it, and Ronald would sit for hours trying to communicate with her. As he continued his story, I could almost visualize the events unfolding. Something had shifted in him that day, something dark and frightening. Then he continued telling me about what the boy had gone through since that day. Right after his aunt passed away, frightening things started happening in that house. At midnight, Roland's mother began hearing strange noises coming from his room at night, scratching sounds, like fingernails scraping the walls. Roland lay awake, eyes wide open, staring at something in the darkness. He felt a presence, something lurking beside his bed, watching him. Henry leaned forward. He told me how Roland had confided in his older friend, saying he felt eyes watching him every night as it stood at the edge of his bed, silent but terrifying. The next morning, Roland's mother checked his bed and found scratch marks on the mattress. And more than that, his mother found them on Roland's own skin. Roland would scream, sometimes laugh loudly in the middle of the night. His voice changed, becoming rough, distorted, and pained. Roland's mother would rush in, only to find him alone, trembling, his eyes filled with fear. He told her about them, strange, shadowy figures. They all gathered around his bed, staring with their hollow mouths open in a silent scream. They all thought Roland was different. Everyone knew something was invading him, but no one could stop it or help him. I shuddered as the old man recounted the family's desperate decision to call for an exorcism. Roland's family called in priests to perform an exorcism. Father Raymond was among them, placing a cross under Roland's pillow, hoping to drive out whatever haunted the house. The ritual began, Latin whispers filling the room. The exorcism became chaotic. Roland writhed on the bed, growling like an animal as if the cross caused him unbearable pain. Furniture flew across the room, and the cross seemed to burn him, driving him into a violent rage. Latin phrases poured from his mouth, mixed with a raspy laugh. His body twisted in unnatural ways, his eyes staring at something invisible. Father Raymond performed many exorcisms on Roland, and he endured immense pain. During the exorcisms, he would roll and vomit, spit, speak in Latin, then laugh uncontrollably. His voice was like a demon from the depths. Once, during an exorcism, Roland suddenly broke free from the priest's grip and lunged at the metal bed frame. He swung it wildly, striking a priest's arm, forcing them to halt the exorcism. On the night of the final exorcism, words appeared on Roland's body as if someone invisible was carving them with a sharp knife. On the final night, 3 priests performed Roland's last exorcism, even witnessing his body levitating. When they recited the final incantation, Roland's body fell motionless onto the bed. Everyone believed he was cured. Roland's family moved away soon after, and no one ever saw him again. Neighbors avoided the house, cursing it. Some families even moved away due to strange occurrences. He told me that some believe Roland's spirit never left, that he's still trapped in that house. I shuddered, recalling the boy in the window grinning at me, his eyes dark and hollow. I told the old man what I'd seen. Hesitating, as I said the boy looked no older than 14. The old man nodded slowly, saying that was Roland's exact age when he vanished. I was stunned by what I'd heard. The old man pointed to a small room under the stairs, suggesting I sleep there. He warned me again to stay away from the exorcised house, then went upstairs. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, wide awake, unable to shake the image of the boy from my mind. I wondered what would have happened if he hadn't come. Could I have been the next, just as the boy had said? The sun finally rose, and the memory of the night clung to me like a shadow. I thanked Henry and left, but the questions remained. Did Roland die during the exorcism? His soul trapped forever, or had something darker consumed him? But one thing was certain, I would never return to Cottage City again. The echo of the forgotten sonata. Silver Hollow was known for its quiet streets, friendly faces, and a sense of safety. But the highway just outside its borders told a different story. For months, drivers had vanished without a trace, and rumors of a masked figure haunting the lonely stretch of road began to spread. Locals whispered about this mysterious stalker, but no one had seen him close enough to describe. Nick Hollis, an investigator, was assigned to go undercover as a long-haul truck driver to uncover the truth behind these mysterious disappearances. Nick was skeptical. A wholesome-looking town like Silver Hollow didn't seem like the hiding place of a serial killer. He didn't know if the road and the small town were connected, but highways didn't lie, and the rising number of disappearances demanded answers. Although he lived in the town, he had never noticed anything strange about it. Most people were genuinely kind. His cover was simple: a new truck driver passing through the area, taking odd routes to make a living. He disguised himself and rented a small apartment on the edge of town. During the day, Nick observed the locals, casually chatting at diners or gas stations. Everyone was polite, almost overly friendly, as if trying to erase any doubt. But unease settled in at night as the highway stretched endlessly into darkness, lit only by the occasional flicker of headlights. It was Nick's third night on the highway. Suddenly, a figure darted across the road, briefly illuminated by the truck's headlights. He slammed the brakes, the truck skidding slightly before coming to a halt. His mind raced. Who would be out here at this hour? He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, scanning the roadside. As the flashlight swept across the ground, Nick spotted something wedged under a nearby rock, a crumpled piece of paper. He hesitated, then stepped forward and bent down to pick it up. The paper read, "Turn back. You won't find them alive." A chill ran down his spine. He swept the flashlight across the area again, but saw no one. Nick hurried back to his truck. He glanced at the rearview mirror again, but all he saw was the dark highway stretching behind him. The note felt like a warning, and Nick knew he couldn't ignore it. The following night, Nick parked his truck at a small rest stop along the highway to get a better vantage point. Around 2 a.m., he noticed a car with its lights off creeping along the road, as if trying to avoid detection. Nick started his truck and followed from a distance. The car turned onto a dense, overgrown path leading away from the highway. Nick parked nearby, grabbed his binoculars, and observed. A masked man stepped out of the car, dragging a heavy-looking bag. He disappeared into the trees. Nick's instincts kicked in, and he quietly followed on foot, keeping his distance. After a few minutes, he spotted the man crouched by a small fire, rummaging through the bag's contents, wallets, phones, and jewelry. Nick crept closer, careful not to make a sound. His plan was to observe long enough to identify the man and his habits, then report back. But as he moved, a twig snapped under his foot. The masked man said, "Who's there?" Nick raised his hands in surrender.
Just a truck driver passing through. Got lost.
The masked man stood up, holding a knife.
"This road isn't for wandering. You should leave,"
he muttered before vanishing into the woods. Nick immediately called for backup, and a quick search of the area uncovered a stash of stolen goods. 2 days later, the masked man was caught and identified as a petty thief who had been robbing and extorting travelers. Nick's instincts told him this man wasn't responsible for the disappearances. The thief's petty crimes were nothing compared to the horrors the missing travelers had faced. After capturing the masked thief on the highway, Nick couldn't shake the unease in his mind. The petty thief's words echoed in his memory. The real monster isn't dumb enough to get caught. He started noticing inconsistencies. A house with windows perpetually shut. A place he often passed but never saw anyone. Upon investigation, he realized it was his cousin Derek's house, who lived on the town's outskirts. Derek had always been approachable, someone Nick trusted. But during a casual visit to Derek's house, Nick sensed something was off. Derek's home was cozy, adorned with old family photos, and faintly smelled of wood. While chatting over coffee, Nick's sharp detective instincts picked up on strange details. Scratches on the floor near a cabinet, an unusual lock on the basement door, and a faint metallic scent in the air. While Derek excused himself to take a call, Nick wandered through the living room, his curiosity growing. A framed photo on the mantel caught his attention. It was a picture of Derek standing with a group of locals, including a man reported missing months ago. That night, Nick pretended to leave but parked his truck nearby, watching. Using his lock-picking skills, Nick snuck around the back and gently opened the door. Nick opened the basement door and descended the stairs. The stench hit him first, a nauseating mix of damp earth and decay. The dim light from a single bulb revealed a chilling scene. Rows of Polaroids were pinned to the walls, some showing missing persons from case files, all in varying states of fear and distress. A bloodied tarp covered something large on the floor. Nearby were necklaces, wallets, and torn jackets scattered carelessly. The basement resembled something out of a nightmare. Rows of industrial freezers lined the walls, each labeled with dates and names. A workbench was filled with surgical tools, knives meticulously arranged. As Nick turned to leave, he heard footsteps above. Derek's voice rang out, calm but chilling.
You weren't supposed to see this, Nick.
Derek appeared at the top of the stairs, holding a shotgun, his face devoid of its usual warmth. He revealed his twisted reasoning, claiming he was protecting the town by ensuring no locals came to harm. Knowing he couldn't reach his concealed weapon, Nick noticed a toolbox on a nearby shelf. Inside, he spotted a flashlight with a cracked lens and a reflective object sticking out of the corner, an old mirror. He began forming a plan. Nick stepped back toward the toolbox, feigning nervous compliance.
At least let me clean up the mess I've made, Derek. Let me pull the tarp back.
As Nick knelt to adjust the tarp, he discreetly grabbed the mirror from the toolbox. Using the flashlight's cracked lens to create a distraction, he angled the mirror to reflect the light from the overhead bulb. Nick raised the flashlight, aiming it at Derek. The cracked lens split the beam, momentarily blinding and distracting him with a sudden burst of light. As Derek instinctively stepped back, Nick lunged toward a nearby shelf, knocking over a stack of paint cans. The heavy cans tumbled down, causing Derek to stagger and drop the shotgun. Nick slammed the basement door shut and locked it from the outside, using a nearby chair to block the handle. Wasting no time, he pulled out his phone and called for backup. Authorities arrested Derek and seized the horrifying evidence from the basement. Inside the freezers were packages labeled as meat, but peeling back the layers revealed severed hands and feet, meticulously wrapped and disturbingly labeled. Even as the case was closed, Nick couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness of Silver Hollow ran deeper than his cousin's monstrous deeds. Behind the neighbor's door. It was December, and the neighborhood had started decorating for the holidays. I knew all my neighbors, and they were all very friendly. The neighbors lit up the streets with their festive displays. Paul, our neighbor to the right, was no different. He had put up his lights early, which I found unusual for a single man in his 40s. He seemed kind enough, though a bit lonely. I didn't see him often. He came and went for work, but I always greeted him when we crossed paths. Recently, though, I hadn't seen him at all. His car hadn't moved from the driveway in days. One night, I noticed Paul's house across the street. His Christmas lights were flickering wildly, not the usual twinkling effect. It was erratic, more like a wiring glitch. The flickering lights gave the house an unsettling feeling. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was just some electrical issue, nothing to worry about. The next morning, I went to work. Paul's car was still in the driveway, and once again, all his curtains were tightly shut. That evening, I went outside and saw everything was exactly the same as the night before. I decided to be kind and let him know as well as check if he was okay since I hadn't seen him. I walked over, hesitating for a moment before knocking on the door. There was no answer, so I rang the bell. Again, nothing. After the third ring, Paul finally opened the door. Paul greeted me with a forced smile. I told him about his flickering Christmas lights and how I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. I asked if he was okay, since I hadn't seen him in a while. He said he just wasn't feeling well. From the way he spoke, I felt his demeanor was awkward and cold. I noticed when he raised his hand, there were black smudges or soot on it. I glanced down briefly, and he immediately pulled his hand back behind him. Then I heard something from inside the house. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but it sounded like a child's voice. Paul didn't have any kids. I was about to ask if he heard it too, but I decided against it. It sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at Paul, but he didn't seem to notice. The sound seemed to come from deep within his house, distant and muffled. His expression didn't change, but there was a coldness in his eyes. I was about to leave, but something inside me, an indescribable feeling, held me back. Then I decided to go back. He was about to close the door when he seemed surprised to see me return. I awkwardly made an excuse, asking if I could borrow some tools to fix a pipe. He politely and courteously invited me into the house. While Paul was rummaging through things in the living room, I asked if I could use the bathroom. On the way, I noticed something strange, a bookshelf in an almost empty room. It was placed in an oddly conspicuous spot and had a few stacks of cardboard boxes. As I got closer, I noticed dark stains on the walls and smudges on the bookshelf. They looked strange. Drawn by the oddity, I tried to take a closer look.
Is it making a knocking sound?
I thought I heard something and slowly moved closer to investigate. It sounded almost like something or someone was moving behind the bookshelf. Just as I reached out to touch it, Paul suddenly appeared in the doorway, asking,
"What are you doing?"
I quickly lied, saying I was just admiring some of the books. Glancing at the bookshelf, I smiled and asked,
Do you enjoy detective and mystery stories too? Let's talk about them.
but he gave a forced smile and nodded.
"Sure. Now can you leave?"
Seeing this, I decided to leave. After leaving, my mind was filled with questions. Why was Paul acting so strange? Why did that room feel so unsettling? It left me with a genuinely weird and uneasy feeling. I decided I would keep a closer eye on him for my own safety. A few days later, I kept observing and devised a plan. I stood in front of Paul's house with some pastries in hand, ready to knock and invite him to a Christmas gathering. As usual, Paul politely declined the invitation, but mentioned he might stop by later. A few minutes later, I saw Paul leave his house, get into his car, and drive off to somewhere suspicious. Seizing the opportunity, I cautiously made my way to the back of his house. He might return quickly, since the back door wasn't locked. I hesitated for a moment, considering leaving, unsure if this was the right thing to do. But then my eyes caught something that made me realize I couldn't hesitate any longer. I saw it, the trash can outside Paul's house. Items that didn't belong, rags stained with dark streaks and dried specks that looked like blood, and even children's clothing. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The door creaked open, and I slipped inside. The house was silent, eerily still. I cautiously moved toward the bookshelf I had seen and suspected earlier. As I approached the shelf, I fumbled around and noticed a book sticking out oddly. I grabbed it and pulled it out. As I pulled it, the bookshelf suddenly shifted, revealing a dark space that looked like a hidden room. I stepped inside and was utterly horrified. The room was a chaotic mess, boxes, shattered items, and strange objects scattered everywhere. In the far corner, something moved in the shadows. I took another step forward, feeling the weight of the air pressing down on me. Then, there he was, a little boy, trembling and trapped in the basement, his wide eyes filled with fear. My first instinct was to help the boy. I barely managed to remove the gag from his mouth when footsteps echoed through the house. Paul was back. My worst fear had come true. I quickly crouched down and whispered urgently to the boy, telling him to stay quiet as I guided him to hide. I hurriedly ran to find a different hiding spot, but Paul already suspected someone was in the house and began searching. He discovered me when I carelessly let part of my shirt show. He stomped on my shirt and said,
You shouldn't have come here.
Before I could react, Paul grabbed a nearby baseball bat and began swinging it forcefully at me. I barely dodged the first blow. Objects shattered around me. I rushed toward the kitchen, hoping to distract him and keep him away from the boy. My hand grabbed a pepper shaker, and I threw it into Paul's face to obscure his vision. But it didn't faze him at all. Taking advantage of his momentary blindness, I grabbed a frying pan and struck him on the head, forcing him to stagger back. The blows he landed on me left painful bruises, and his strength was greater than I had anticipated. I kept running to distract him, but I realized too late that he had gone down to the basement to find the boy. I called the police and ran down, throwing objects to distract him. I shouted at him to surrender, warning him that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Paul pretended to surrender or negotiate, but he immediately launched a surprise attack when I let my guard down. Once again, I found myself at a disadvantage. He grabbed my neck and began choking me as I desperately reached for a glass bottle nearby, but I couldn't grasp it. I was nearly losing consciousness from the strangulation when, unexpectedly, the boy screamed, distracting Paul and giving me an opening. I seized the moment, grabbed the bottle, and struck him on the head. With a painful groan, Paul staggered back and finally released his grip on my neck. I quickly got up, pulled the boy up the basement stairs, and locked every door behind me. The police arrived within minutes, surrounding Paul's house. Paul was arrested, but what they uncovered left me horrified. The boy had been abducted from a completely different town and had been held in the basement for over 4 days. As for the flickering Christmas lights, the boy was a genius who had somehow figured out how to manipulate them from the basement as a cry for help to attract someone's attention outside. The nightmare was finally over. I was relieved that the boy was reunited with his family. I hoped he would go on to live a normal life and overcome this ordeal. The strange man in the vacant lot. Lucas and his fiancée, Emily, decided to spend a weekend getaway at Lucas's family cabin deep in the woods. They enjoyed outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, and four-wheeling, making the most of the peaceful atmosphere the cabin provided. On the last day, Emily and Lucas's family decided to leave early, while the couple chose to stay behind for some quiet time before heading home that evening. As the sun set, Lucas and Emily packed their belongings into the truck and began driving down the dirt road leading out of the property. The road was surrounded by dense forest, and they had to pass through 5 gates along the way, each secured with a lock that Lucas had to unlock and relock as they passed. When they reached the 4th gate, something felt different. It was located in a large clearing, allowing the landscape to be clearly visible under the moonlight. Still, something about it unsettled him, as if an unseen threat lurked nearby. He unlocked the gate and drove through, but as he turned back to lock it again, he noticed a strange light in the distance. A flashlight beam flickered through the trees, and the silhouette of a man appeared. Lucas hesitated, watching the figure for a moment, but dismissed it, assuming it was just another property owner. However, just as Lucas began locking the gate, he heard a voice calling for help. Squinting into the darkness, he called out,
"Hey, are you okay?"
and slowly stepped toward the flashlight. At that moment, the flashlight jerked wildly in all directions. Lucas could see the figure sprinting toward them, but the man wasn't shouting, he was just running. The man was dressed in dark clothing and carried a backpack. Panic surged through Lucas, and he rushed back to the truck. He jumped in and sped off, trying to stay calm, telling Emily that he had just been startled. He drove about a quarter of a mile before reaching the final gate. Putting the truck in park, he hesitated for a moment, glancing back toward where he had seen the man. Seeing nothing, he stepped out and walked toward the gate. Then, in the distance, a flickering light appeared again. It was him. The man was coming. He appeared once again, sprinting toward them. Summoning his courage, Lucas shouted,
"Do you need help?"
hoping the man would stop and respond. But nothing changed. But this time, he didn't run toward Lucas like before. Instead, he charged straight at the truck where Emily was sitting. She was in danger. Emily, now seeing the man in the rearview mirror, asked Lucas to check if he needed help. Lucas called back, revealing his earlier encounter, and they both realized the man was likely chasing them. This was a serious threat.
Lucas, we have to go.
Emily screamed. Emily shrieked as the man sprinted toward the truck, grabbing the door handle and yanking it violently, trying to force it open. Lucas acted on instinct. He rushed to the back of the truck, yanked open the toolbox, and grabbed a tire iron. He swung the metal bar down onto the man's wrist with a sickening crack. The man let out a pained scream. He stumbled backward, his arm hanging limply at his side. But instead of running, he just smiled, a twisted, unsettling grin. And then, he stepped forward again. Lucas jumped back into the truck, slammed the door shut, and floored the gas. The truck shot forward, kicking up dirt as they sped through the final gate. Emily twisted in her seat, looking out the back window in terror. "What the hell just happened?" she asked. But Lucas had no answer. He had no idea what or who that man was. Lucas glanced at the rearview mirror. The man stood in the middle of the road, not running, not moving, just smiling. When they reached the main highway, Lucas called his father and told him what had happened. His father had never seen anyone act like that in the area before. The next day, an uncle visited the cabin, but found no trace of the strange man. And to this day, they have never discovered his identity or his motive why he did what he did. The madman on the highway. This particular memory has haunted her with anxiety and panic for years. She was a single mother, working as an Amazon delivery driver to make ends meet. Lucy would drive to various delivery locations, and one time she was on the highway near midnight. The sky was overcast. Thunder rumbled around her, but the rain had yet to begin. The low fuel light flickered as a warning. The highway stretched ahead, desolate, surrounded by dense, dark forests. Lucy checked the map and saw a gas station 15 minutes away. She decided to take her chances, skipping a crowded one of the biggest mistakes she ever made. Following the GPS directions, she turned onto a dusty road surrounded by thick woods. The road was so uneven that speeding up was nearly impossible. Then, Lucy saw him. A man stood by the roadside, dressed in tattered clothes. His scarred, filthy skin glowed under the dim light as he stared at her. Thinking he might need help, she made her second mistake. She stopped the car, just a few feet away from the man. She rolled the window down slightly and leaned out.
Are you okay, sir?
The man didn't respond, but growled instead. His voice was strange, unlike anything she had ever heard. It was a broken, animalistic howl. Lucy stepped out of the car. That was her third mistake. As soon as she exited the car, the man took a few steps forward and then stopped. Lucy asked again if he needed help, but this time, something changed. The man crouched down like a predator about to pounce. Then, grinning wickedly, he got on all fours and started crawling toward her. Before Lucy could comprehend what the hell was happening, she bolted for her car. The man began crawling at her, faster than she thought possible. He kept crawling toward her, his sinister grin stretching wider. His unblinking eyes locked onto her. Panic surged through Lucy. She could hear his shrill laughter behind her. But before he reached her, she slammed the car door shut, locked it, and fumbled with trembling hands to start the engine. The condition of the road was terrible. Lucy didn't notice the large ditch on the right. Her car suddenly sped up. The right wheel slipped into the ditch, causing a violent jolt, trapping her vehicle. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead as she looked at the dusty road ahead, surrounded by the deep forest. The only way out now was to step out of the car. The hood of the car suddenly sank. Then, he jumped onto Lucy's hood, pressing his terrifying face against the windshield, grinning savagely. Lucy gagged. The sight was too much to bear.
The man laughed, his mouth wide open, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. He whispered through the glass, his voice echoing in the air.
"I'd love to torture you until you vomit blood."
Lucy's trembling fingers fumbled for her phone, dialing 911. Her voice quivered as she spoke to the dispatcher, pleading for help. She knew it would take at least 10 to 15 minutes for the police to arrive. As Lucy hung up, the man started climbing down from the hood. She checked all the doors, relieved that they were locked. He reached her window and tried to open the door. Then, he turned around and began searching for something on the ground. After a few minutes, he stopped and picked up a large rock. He hurled it at the window. The glass cracked under the impact, but did not shatter. Lucy screamed, gripping the steering wheel tightly.
Stop! Please! What did I do to you?
He just smiled, his eyes wide and wild, raising the rock again. Then, a loud sound car horns blaring, sharp and deafening. Bright headlights illuminated the crazed man. He froze, his expression turning blank, and slowly lowered the rock. The man locked eyes with Lucy one last time. He leaned closer to the window.
"Looks like today is your lucky day. If you ever pass through here again, don't forget to pick me up."
He turned around and ran, disappearing into the forest. The truck pulled up beside Lucy's car, and the driver jumped out to help. The world blurred, then everything faded to black. Lucy had passed out in her car. That day, the police told Lucy they had found several abandoned vehicles left on the road by their missing owners. They had also received reports of 3 missing persons. They said they couldn't find anyone matching Lucy's description of the terrifying man. She didn't know where he was now, but for all delivery drivers and night travelers, the warning was clear: never stop for suspicious strangers, especially when driving alone in a desolate area. The lurking in the middle of the night. This happened to Joy when she was in college. Joy lived alone in her dorm, and it was just an ordinary day like any other. After class, she decided to stop by the nearest grocery store to pick up a few things before heading home. As she walked through the aisles, browsing items, she noticed a strange man lurking in one of them. He was a man with bloodshot eyes and tattered clothes, staring at her from a distance with a strange, unsettling grin. As she continued shopping, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching her. Joy tried to ignore it and quickly grabbed what she needed before heading to the checkout. But as she reached the checkout, she felt his breath on her neck. He leaned in close and whispered something in her ear, something she couldn't quite make out. Joy quickly paid for her items and rushed to her car in the parking lot. As Joy was about to get into her car, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw it was him. He had come from the store and was now charging toward her, a knife in his hand. Joy threw herself into her car, locking the doors just in time, escaping by mere seconds. He stood outside, pounding on the window, shouting obscenities, but she sped off and called the police once she was safe. The police searched the area, but couldn't find the man. Joy was terrified and couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching her. One night, a violent storm rolled in. Joy struggled to sleep and woke up around 5 or 6 a.m.
startled by a particularly loud clap of thunder that shook the house. Then, she noticed a strange shadow. As lightning flashed, she saw the silhouette of a man standing outside her window. His face pressed against the glass, staring at her. It was him, the man from the store. Joy froze in terror. In his hand, he clutched a knife, his gaze fixed on her. With each flash of lightning, the man appeared closer until, suddenly, he vanished along with the storm. Panicked, Joy rushed to check that all the doors were locked. But when she turned back, she saw the man standing in her living room. His terrifying grin widened as he pointed the knife at her and lunged forward, screaming,
You're mine. You're mine.
Joy collapsed to the floor, paralyzed with fear. As he climbed on top of her, the blade of his knife slicing through her clothes. Just when she thought it was over, a loud crash echoed through the room, and she saw him collapse to the floor. Then, Joy saw her neighbor. He had tackled the man, pinning him down and punching him repeatedly until he was unconscious. A wave of relief washed over Joy. She asked her neighbor how he knew she was in danger. He explained that while going to his kitchen for a drink of water, he saw the man lurking around the building through his window. Sensing something was wrong, he decided to watch from a distance to see what would happen. The man was arrested. He had just been released after serving 30 years in prison for attempted murder and assault. The entire ordeal left her traumatized, and for months, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Joy continued to have nightmares about the man who had nearly taken her life that night. If it weren't for her neighbor, things could have ended very differently. The terror on Christmas Eve. This incident happened on Christmas Eve, the year Lena was 13. Since she only lived with her dad, and her family usually either didn't celebrate or celebrated Christmas late, she was used to this. For Lena, Christmas Eve was just like any other night. Her dad was a doctor, so he always had to be on call at the hospital during Christmas holidays. That night was no exception. He wasn't home. Lena was watching TV when she heard a knock at the door, so she went to see who it was. Her front door had a peephole, making it easy to see who was outside. A man stood outside wearing a Santa Claus suit, holding a bag and smiling, waving at Lena to open the door. But something about him seemed off. He didn't look neat at all. Lena approached the door, but didn't open it. She found it odd that someone dressed as Santa Claus would come to her house, of all the houses in the neighborhood. He said,
Hey kid, it's me, Santa Claus. Let me in, and I'll show you.
Maybe other kids would believe him, but Lena knew he wasn't real. Confused and skeptical, because this had never happened before, Lena refused to open the door. The man insisted, saying he had changed the rules this year to give gifts to kids in the neighborhood. But Lena didn't believe him. Instead, she remembered feeling angry while arguing with him. Lena told him she was calling the police. His smile disappeared, and after that, she didn't hear anything else. To be sure, Lena called the police to report him. Unfortunately, they probably didn't believe her and thought she was just an excited kid, hoping Santa Claus would visit. She only knew how to dial 911 and the house number, since it was the 90S and her dad didn't have a mobile phone yet. Lena could only hope the man wouldn't return. But a few minutes later, someone knocked again. When Lena checked, no one was there. She returned to the Christmas tree to continue decorating and wrapping gifts as a surprise for her dad. Lena turned on the TV to watch Christmas specials, which made her feel less lonely. Suddenly, the power went out, leaving the house in darkness. Lena jumped in fright. Now, the only light in the house came from the battery-operated Christmas tree. Then she heard the back door creak open. From the doorway emerged a dark silhouette, slowly advancing. It was the figure of a man. Lena grabbed a flashlight from a nearby drawer and shone it towards the figure. The face revealed was his, the man from earlier, leaning close to her with a sinister grin.
Here's your surprise gift, little one,
he sneered. Lena screamed and ran toward the back door, but she couldn't outrun him. He grabbed her hand and yanked her back. Lena sobbed and screamed, begging for mercy, but he showed no remorse. He taped her mouth shut and began tying her up with rope. As her vision blurred, he stuffed her into a large sack he had brought with him and hoisted it over his shoulder. Lena's next-door neighbor, who was walking his dog, happened to see the man. His actions seemed suspicious. The neighbor remembered that Lena lived alone with her father, who was often away, and her father had occasionally asked him to check on her. He cautiously approached with his dog and asked,
"What are you doing out here at this hour? Is everything okay?"
The man, startled, quickly forced a smile and replied,
"Oh, I'm just preparing a surprise for the kids in the neighborhood."
The man hurriedly hid the sack behind his back, stepping away as his eyes darted around. His strange behavior only heightened the neighbor's suspicions. His dog kept barking, as if trying to warn him of something. It was a smart dog, good at sensing trouble. The neighbor noticed the sack behind the man seemed to be moving slightly. Sensing the man was odd, the neighbor remained cautious. He apologized for bothering him and pretended to head back toward his house. He then heard a faint sound resembling crying and immediately knew something was wrong. Without thinking, he rushed toward the man and shoved him hard, causing him to fall onto the grass. The sack fell, and Lena tumbled out onto the grass, her eyes wide with terror. The man tried to flee, but the neighbor quickly pinned him to the ground and held him there until the police arrived. The man remained on the ground, handcuffed and arrested. Lena was safely escorted back home by her neighbor. Her father returned home immediately after hearing the news. That night, Lena learned the true meaning of fear. She hugged her father tightly, knowing she was lucky to have survived a terrifying Christmas Eve. Weird night at school. I work the night shift as a janitor at a local school. This job is quite fitting for someone who enjoys solitude. Just me, the empty school, and my mop bucket. I only talk to my coworker when absolutely necessary. Most of the time, we divide the school and don't see each other during the entire shift. One night, the school was completely silent. The only sound was the occasional echo of my mop hitting the floor. I've done this 1,000 times, but something about this night felt different, as though something was watching me from the darkness. I brushed it off and kept cleaning. I put on headphones, playing music low enough to still hear if someone was around, but everything seemed normal. I took a break to change the water in my mop bucket. When I returned, I noticed something strange. The wet floor sign I had placed earlier had fallen over. I sighed and stepped forward to pick it up, but that's when I saw them. Small, wet footprints leading away from the sign and down the hallway. I followed the footprints, which led to the staircase heading up to the second floor. I stopped, trying to listen for any sound. Then, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It was fast, a flicker of motion at the end of the hallway. I rushed to the end of the hallway, but no one was there. At that moment, I heard faint laughter, the giggling of a child. It echoed through the empty school, sending a chill down my spine. I turned, searching for the source, but saw no one. A loud crash suddenly broke the silence. The sound came from the first floor. My mop bucket had been tipped over, spilling water into a large puddle. My blood boiled with frustration. Someone was messing with me, and I wasn't in the mood for games. I grabbed a dry mop and started cleaning up. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched as I tried to figure out what was happening. Were there students still in the building? Had someone snuck in after hours? I decided to talk to my coworker. Maybe she had seen something too. She laughed and told me I was joking with her. She looked at me, completely puzzled, shaking her head. I've been here the whole time. I couldn't make sense of it. I left her workspace and went back to finish my shift. Another hour passed. I was trying to make up for lost time when, without warning, the entire school went dark. For a moment, I was surrounded by darkness. Then the emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in a dim red glow. It felt like the entire building had turned into a horror movie set. I knew where the electrical room was, so I decided to head there. But before I could reach it, I heard a scream, my coworker's scream, echoing through the school, filled with terror. I ran toward the electrical room, fear welling up inside me. When I reached the door, I noticed it was slightly ajar. When I pushed the door open, I expected to see my coworker inside. Instead, there was a figure standing in the dark. I couldn't tell who it was, but something about it felt off. The figure moved closer. Before I could pull out my phone, it lunged forward and slammed the door shut in my face. Panicked, the first ran away. I needed to find my coworker. When I reached her area, her mop bucket was lying in the middle of the hallway, but she was nowhere to be found. I called out her name, but there was no response. The only sound was faint laughter, echoing again through the empty hallway. The whispers made me freeze. I turned quickly, gripping the mop handle tightly, ready to defend myself. I moved slowly and cautiously. Something was happening here, something I couldn't explain. I headed up to the second floor, where I had heard the laughter earlier. When I reached the hallway, I noticed something strange. The wet footprints, the same ones I had seen earlier, had returned. I stared at the small, damp prints, which seemed to be heading toward me. I ducked into the nearest classroom, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, trying to catch my breath, my hands trembling. That's when I saw the blackboard. Scrawled in large, jagged letters were the words, "Hello." Had someone come in here? But I hadn't heard anyone enter. Suddenly, I heard the door rattling. Something was trying to get in. The handle twisted violently, shaking as though someone, or something, was pounding on it. I backed away, gripping the mop handle like a lifeline. The pounding on the door stopped. I slowly crept toward it and pressed my ear against it. But there was nothing. I reached for the doorknob, turning it as gently as possible. I cracked the door open slightly and peered into the hallway. I cautiously stepped out, scanning for any signs of movement. I had to find my coworker. I couldn't stay in this school alone any longer. As I walked down, from where I stood, I saw a shadow at the bottom of the stairs. It didn't move, just stood there, a dark figure faintly visible in the red light. As I got closer, I saw a young boy, maybe 13 or 14, standing with his back to me, wearing a tattered school uniform. I reached out, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "Hey, are you okay?" The child didn't respond. I took another step forward, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch his shoulder. Then the child turned around, a horrifying mask, pale and soulless eyes, blood dripping from his nose, and a wide, toothy grin aimed at me. The child let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the stairwell, a shrill, piercing sound that felt like it was ripping through my skull. I staggered backward, dropping the mop. I ran as fast as I could down the hallway. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get out. The hallway seemed endlessly long in a horrifying way. I burst through the door into the gym. The gym was pitch black. I backed away from the door, my body trembling with fear. The footsteps stopped. The door remained shut. For a brief moment, I thought I was safe. But then, from the far corner of the gym, I heard it, a basketball bouncing. There, in the far corner, the child still stood, his face twisted into that eerie grin, holding a basketball and bouncing it slowly. Then the boy whispered, "Hello," his voice echoing through the empty gym. I stepped back, my legs trembling. The child took a step forward, then another. Each step was slow, deliberate, as though he was savoring the fear he was causing. I didn't think anymore. I bolted outside, running as fast as I could toward the parking lot. My legs felt like they would give out at any moment, but I kept running. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, finally unlocking the door and jumping inside. As I started the engine, I looked back at the school. In one of the second-floor windows, I saw the child standing there, staring down at me with that twisted smile. I hit the gas and sped out of the parking lot. The image of that child burned into my mind. I didn't return to the school the next night. I never went back there again.
The House of the Lost Child. It was 2006 when my family moved into this house. My parents decided to quit their jobs and start anew in the countryside. I was just a child then. But something about this house struck me immediately. The first thing I noticed when we moved in was the stairs. Every time I passed by, I would see a shadow silently moving up and down. It never frightened me. In fact, it felt oddly familiar. I was 6 years old, but I could always see things that others couldn't, and this house was no exception. I didn't tell my parents right away, not because I was scared, but because I felt that presence meant us no harm. Still, I was very afraid of the dark. My room was upstairs while the bathroom was downstairs. Every night, before going to bed, I would use the bathroom to avoid facing the fear of going down the stairs alone at night. But one night, my mother's voice woke me. She called out to me, angrily and irritably, telling me to come downstairs and not to run around anymore. I sat up in bed, confused. I hadn't run at all. In the following days, I kept experiencing similar incidents. My mother often scolded me for running around the house, accusing me of mischief. I had told her many times that I hadn't done it, but she never believed me. Then one night, the power went out, and we were almost engulfed in darkness, lit only by a few flickering candles in the living room. As we sat together, I saw it again, a shadow. It swayed back and forth, hovering over the sofa. My mother didn't see it, but I did. That presence was very strong but had no malice. That night, as we lay in bed, my mother and I heard a voice, soft yet clear as day.
Mom, where are you? I'm cold.
That voice belonged to a child, and it came from just outside our bedroom. My mother looked at me, eyes wide with fear. As I grew older, I began to understand that the shadow wasn't there to harm us. It wasn't a ghost trying to scare us, but a lost child searching for something. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that spirit was looking for its mother. I had a friend who could sense things like I could, and they suggested that I tell the spirit to move on. So one quiet afternoon, I stood in the living room and said to the air, "I believe your mother loves you very much. You can move on. It's time to go to a happier place." The house felt different afterward. The shadow disappeared. The footsteps stopped. No more voices at night. I thought that the spirit had finally found peace, or perhaps it needed to validate something because it had been left here and unable to move on in this house. In 2018, my aunt, Tita, who had worked abroad, returned home to retire. One evening, we sat together in the living room, sharing stories. We talked about the strange occurrences that had taken place in the house over the years. I told her about that spirit, about how my mother had once mistaken it for me because it looked like a small child. I explained how I had ultimately helped it move on. As I was speaking, I noticed something. Tita, she's crying. She started telling me a story I had never heard before. Long before I was born, my grandmother, She was pregnant with Aunt Tita. Not long after that, there was a baby boy. She named her son Angelo. Suddenly one day, Grandma left and didn't come back. At that time, Aunt and Angelo were too young to know what to do in this remote suburb. So, Angelo lay on the sofa. The boy was sick and passed away in his sleep while clutching a small glass jar that his mother had given him. He was only about 3 to 4 years old. At that time, my aunt was too young to understand what was happening and thought her brother was just sleeping until one day a neighbor came and took the boy to a small coffin and buried him. Our new house sits on this land. Perhaps the boy could not move on because he was waiting and didn't know when his mother would return. Sometime later, my aunt, the boy's sister, passed away just after we talked about him. Now, standing in front of the house, I can't shake the feeling that something has changed. Then came the unmistakable sound of soft footsteps. They echoed from the hallway behind me, moving toward the stairs. I turned around, breath caught in my throat. The shadow had returned. As I climbed the stairs, I saw the shadow standing right above and sliding into my bedroom. Upon reaching the room, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob, and just as I was about to turn it, I heard,
"Mom, where are you?"
I slowly pushed the door open, the creaking hinges filling the silent house. The room was bathed in the faint light of the moon filtering through the window, casting a cold glow over everything. My heart skipped a beat as I saw Angelo. This time, he was not just a shadow. He stood in the middle of the room, a small, frail figure, unmistakably a child. His head was bowed down. Then slowly, Angelo lifted his head, and for the first time, I saw his face. A face with deep-set eyes filled with sorrow. His mouth opened, and in a voice that sent chills down my spine, he whispered,
"Mom, where is she?"
I wanted to tell him, to explain that she had passed away. But before I could say anything, he raised a small glass jar, looking at it as if it held an ominous energy imprisoning his soul. Angelo stood still, clutching the jar, looking at me with hollow eyes. I had to do something. I couldn't let Angelo remain trapped forever. I took a deep breath, my voice trembling as I finally spoke to Angelo, telling him that his mother was no longer here. I told him to always believe that she loved him, so I urged him to move on. For a moment, Angelo's expression softened, but then he tightened his grip on the jar. His voice rang out again, firm and more desperate.
"Where is my mom? I want to see her."
As if he didn't believe the words I was saying. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized there were no words that could satisfy him. He wasn't just seeking peace. He wanted his mother, and nothing else mattered more than that. I could feel the air shift, the temperature drop, and for the first time in years, I felt fear. I couldn't let him stay. I had to help him find peace. Without thinking, I stepped toward him, my hands trembling. "Angelo, I can help you find her. But first, you need to let go, to release everything." His gaze shifted from the jar to me, his hollow eyes filled with confusion and longing. Slowly, very slowly, he began to loosen his grip on the jar. As it fell from his hand and shattered on the floor, the room went silent. Angelo's figure began to fade, dissolving into the moonlight. Before he disappeared completely, I heard his voice one last time, soft, almost a whisper.
"Thank you."
I stood outside the house. The weight that had burdened it for years was gone. Angelo was finally free. The feeling of guilt lingered, but I knew I had finally helped him find the peace he had been searching for all these years. The love his mother had for him, the love that had anchored Angelo to this world, had freed him. Perhaps he was beginning to understand the painful truths that even I never wanted to hear. He would likely continue his journey to find his mother in another world where he truly belonged. I looked back at the house one last time. It no longer felt haunted. Now, it was just a house, quiet and still. Angelo had gone, but he left behind something much more enduring. It was a son's love for his mother, transcending the boundaries of life and death. The town's haunted mystery. It was during one of our arguments, moving from yelling to an uncomfortable silence. Kira suggested, almost hesitantly, maybe we just need to leave. Start somewhere new. She stared at the wall, her voice trembling. I thought differently. I didn't believe a change of scenery would solve anything, but despair hung thick in the air between us. We'd gone through endless nonsense for months, arguing over small things like dishes left in the sink or unwashed clothes, which then escalated into intense fights. Our little daughter, Lily, would stand in the corner, clutching her toy, her eyes sad as if she understood more than we realized. The arguments became unbearable, and I felt as though our family was crumbling day by day. The drive to our new town was filled with silence. The sun began to set, casting an orange glow on the horizon as we traded one skyline for endless fields. I cracked the window, breathing in fresh air, feeling a weight lift off my chest. Kira smiled at me, a faint glimmer of hope in her eyes. Eventually, we drove up to our new house. It was a small, cozy old building nestled among others on the street. As we unpacked, I felt a flicker of hope. It was the first time I saw her. Margaret, an elderly woman in a sweater and long skirt, stood on the sidewalk. She waved as she saw us, holding a plate of cookies to welcome us to the neighborhood. As we exchanged pleasantries, I noticed a girl standing behind Margaret, around Lily's age but with a troubling paleness. Then she complimented my daughter. I replied, trying to smile politely, but something about Margaret felt strange. Her enthusiasm was odd. Suddenly, she turned serious, mentioning a certain well. She began to tell me about a wishing well in town, urging me to bring Lily there, assuring me she would love it. A wishing well. I found it rather strange, like a local legend from where I lived. She said it would bring luck to anyone who made a wish and tossed in a coin, a tradition spanning generations. The conversation made me uncomfortable. Kira shrugged, but I felt a chill as I watched Margaret leave, the girl following her like a shadow. In the days that followed, the town felt like a breath of fresh air. The change in atmosphere worked wonders for our family. Kira and I argued less, and Lily seemed to thrive in the open space of our new home. The townsfolk were friendly and laid back. Yet, the well kept coming up in conversation. I overheard a cashier mention it, saying, "The well changed my life." At work, my coworkers talked about it as if it were some sort of miracle. Finally, one night, I mentioned it to Kira, about everyone's obsession with this well. She just thought it was probably one of their local traditions. But the unease grew heavier. The atmosphere at work changed, my hours were cut, and coworkers became distant. It felt like something was pressing down on us, suffocating us. Kira's mood turned dark, and we argued over trivial things again. One night, I was wandering through the forest. I stumbled upon the well. It stood ominously in a clearing, its stone walls oddly slick. I could feel the weight of the town's tradition pulling me back. What if I made a wish? Desperation clawed within me. I approached the well, heart pounding. I had nothing left to lose. I pulled a quarter from my pocket, thinking of my family, of needing things to get better. I tossed the coin in, wishing for things to improve. A silence fell over me as I turned to leave. At that moment, Margaret appeared, her smile wide and unsettling. "You made a wish, didn't you?" I nodded, feeling a mix of hope and dread rising within me. She simply said, "It will come true," and then smiled, walking away. The next morning, I woke up to the familiar warmth in bed. Kira lay beside me, her face peaceful. I glanced around, feeling a weight lift from my chest. I had a strange feeling of hope, as though everything was falling back into place. Breakfast was a cheerful event, laughter filling the room. It felt like the burdens of the past had been lifted. We were happy, almost too happy. But a small part of me felt something wasn't quite right. And everything from that day began that night. While lying in bed, I couldn't escape the feeling of insecurity. Something is wrong. Lily's scream broke the silence, and I rushed to my child's room. Lily trembled, her eyes wide open in fear as she cried and pointed to me that there was a monster in the window. I hurried to the window, pulled back the curtains, but there was nothing there. Just the empty street and the trees. What is happening? I whispered to myself, feeling panic rise within me. I turned back to Lily, who was still staring at the window, pale and terrified. I stood frozen, trying to comfort her in my arms, though the unease gnawed at me. I stayed up late that night, with Lily between Kira and me. Kira, exhausted from sleepless nights, drifted off, leaving me on high alert. The following days were a chaotic mix of anxiety and paranoia. Lily's nightmares became a nightly occurrence, and each time, I found myself jolted awake by her screams. I tried to distract myself with errands around town, but whispers seemed to follow me everywhere I went. The locals had hollow smiles, with something in their eyes I couldn't quite identify. It felt like the whole town was watching me. "Everything will be fine," a cheerful cashier said as I bought groceries, but her smile felt like a mask hiding something sinister. "Just make a wish by the well." I never wanted this nightmare. I never wanted my family involved in any twisted game. One evening, after another night of Lily's screams, I found myself back at the well, drawn by some force I couldn't understand. The air was tense as I approached, Margaret's words echoing in my mind. As I stood there, I noticed the well's surface glistening under the moonlight, almost inviting me. I leaned over the edge, peering into the darkness. The chill of the night air made me shiver. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, my heart pounding. No one was there, but the feeling of being watched washed over me once again. I felt a presence lurking in the darkness, and panic took over. I ran home, my breaths coming fast and shallow. I rushed inside, slamming the door behind me. Kira was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I quickly ran to Lily's room to check on her and saw she was fast asleep. But when I looked closer, I noticed a thin layer of sweat on her forehead. Something wasn't right. I went back to Kira, pacing the floor, my mind spinning. We need to do something. This can't keep happening. Kira's gaze was distant, lost in thought. She said to me, "Maybe we should leave. We could pack up and go somewhere else." "No," I snapped stubbornly, feeling the weight of despair. "We can't keep running. We need to find a way to fix this." That night, I decided to confront Margaret. I needed to know the truth. With my heart racing, I left the house and headed to hers. As I approached, the atmosphere changed. I knocked on the door, fear rising within me. She greeted me with a smile that seemed friendly, but it didn't feel genuine at all. I desperately told her I needed to know what was happening. Her expression turned serious, her eyes narrowing. "You know, wishes come with consequences," she said softly. Leaning closer, "You wished for things to be better, but what if there's a cost?" I felt myself unraveling as she kept talking about what I had lost. She tilted her head, that predatory smile returning. "It's not always clear. Sometimes you get what you wish for by sacrificing something else, something precious." I stumbled back, wondering if I had traded my daughter's happiness for a hollow life. When I returned home, I found Lily in her room, but she wasn't the girl I once knew. Laughter seemed to have been replaced by an eerie silence. She looked at me with hollow eyes, like an empty shell. Regret weighed heavily on me. I had wanted to fix everything, but I had only made it worse, foolishly believing in something dark and twisted. I returned to the well, desperate to undo my wish. I knelt by the edge, staring into the darkness. I want my daughter back. I didn't want this to happen, but the well remained silent. Days passed, and our home became like a prison as Lily worsened, her strange behaviors leaving me helpless and heartbroken, unsure of what to do. Every time I went outside, those around me kept smiling, but their eyes hid a secret, a dark truth I could never grasp. They too had made their wishes, and I was just another pawn in their game. In the end, I made a decision. I would play the game, just like Margaret had. I would find another family and make them wish, too, to replace my daughter. As I walked through the town, I spotted a family moving in down the street, a young couple with a little girl who looked just like Lily. I approached them, a smile spreading across my face. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said, hiding the darkness within. And no, with a new cast in the pipeline. Maybe the darkness had clouded my vision and taken over. I didn't know when this would end or if there was any escape. The girl looked up, her eyes bright and full of life, unaware of the fate that awaited her. Perhaps I had to be the villain, to save my daughter, my family. Late shift and creepy encounter. It is now 9:30 p.m., and I am still here, stuck in the dim light of the computer screen, the only source of light in a dark, empty office. I glance at the clock, sighing in frustration. I have worked here as a software engineer for 2 years, and nights like these have become all too familiar. I hope to leave soon, but I am still waiting for one last file. I push back from my desk, rubbing my tired eyes. The building is silent, too silent. I stand up, deciding to grab a cup of coffee from the cafeteria to stay awake. As I walk through the open office space, I enjoy the quiet, a calm after the daily chaos of the workday. The sound of the coffee maker buzzing is a small comfort as I pour myself a cup. An idea sparks in my mind, and with a mischievous smile, I head to the security room. After working long hours, I have a master key card that opens every door in the building. I swipe the card and step inside, greeted by a wall of screens, each showing a different part of the building. I sit down, curious, and start scrolling through the camera feeds. It's strange to see the empty squares, the vacant hallways making the passage of time more intriguing. Then, something unusual catches my eye. The elevator doors on the ground floor open, and a woman in a green dress steps out. I have never seen her before, and I am sure she doesn't work here. I track them on the camera, watching as they hold hands walking down the hallway. I lean back in my chair, stunned. Mr. Newman, my boss who left early for a celebration, has returned here in the middle of the night with another woman. I switch to other camera feeds, waiting for them to leave, and I return to his office feed feeling something is off about their expressions. I have a bad feeling. The door opens, and the woman rushes out, clearly upset. Mr. Newman follows, trying to reassure her. After a tense exchange, they head towards the cafeteria. I quickly switch to the cafeteria camera, and sure enough, they enter, sitting at a table. Mr. Newman stands up and sneaks into the kitchen area, leaving her alone. I switch to the kitchen feed, and what I see chills my blood. He is holding a knife, his expression tense, eyes searching for something. My mind races, and before I know it, I rush to the cafeteria. I approach the woman from behind, placing a hand over her mouth before she can scream. "I'm here to help," I whisper. "You need to leave. He's going to hurt you." She looks at me, confused yet scared, and nods. We turn to leave, but Mr. Newman appears in the doorway, blocking our exit, knife firmly in hand. He sneers, asking where we think we're going. I step forward, trying to shield her. He laughs, a cruel sound echoing down the hallway mockingly, saying that if so, he'll make sure we both disappear. I feel the woman beside me tense up, his expression shifting as his eyes narrow when he lunges forward, the knife aimed directly at me. I defended, but the impact was still so brutal that the blade stabbed into my hand. The pain seemed to painfully spread throughout my body. I staggered back, gritting my teeth against the intense pain of his madness. He starts shifting his focus to her, cornering her against the wall, and he begins to wildly raise the knife in anger. Desperation drives me, and I grab a nearby chair, swinging it with the last of my strength. The heavy metal frame strikes his head, causing him to stagger back. Blood flows from the cut on his forehead as he crashes to the floor, dazed for a moment. The woman screams, but she quickly pulls out her phone, her hand shaking as she calls the police. I fell against the wall, clutching my arms, my vision blurring as I struggled to stay conscious. He hisses, wiping blood from his face, saying that what I've caused will have consequences because I've ruined all his plans. He tries to stand up, but he staggers, his breathing becoming rapid and angry. The woman steps back, her voice trembling as she speaks into the phone, reporting our location. She stares down at him, a mix of fear and anger on her face. He looks up, eyes wild, and lunges toward her, but I try to grab his ankle, pulling him down. I strain to pull painfully. I shout, my voice hoarse, "Enough! It's over. You won't get away with this." The sound of approaching sirens fills the air, their wails piercing the silence. The police are on their way. Newman's face pales as he realizes time is running out. He kicks my hand in a desperate attempt to escape. The police burst into the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They find us in the hallway, and within moments, Newman is handcuffed, his expression one of utter defeat as they lead him away. I was loaded onto a stretcher. The paramedics stabilized my arms while the woman stood next to me, her face a mixture of relief and remorse. The next morning, I sit in a room at the police station, an officer seated across the table, looking at me seriously. He recounts the details they have uncovered. Newman had been seeing the woman at the scene, promising to be with her. But when she found out he was married, she threatened to expose him. Panicked and desperate to protect himself, he planned to eliminate her, believing no one would be there to witness his crime. He brought her to the office, hoping to use the quiet space to his advantage. What he didn't anticipate was my presence, my late-night habits, and my caution leading me to the security room. The officer continues to explain that Newman's wife filed for divorce, her anger and disgust evident when she learned the truth. The woman, unaware of his marital status until that night, expresses deep remorse, shaken that she almost lost her life. I lay on the hospital bed, my hand bandaged. The events of that night replayed in my mind, each moment vivid and unsettling. I stumbled upon a dark secret, and in doing so, I saved a life, narrowly escaping death. I know that night will haunt me for a long time, a reminder of how easily darkness can hide behind familiar faces. But as I prepare to leave the hospital, I feel a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that sometimes, even in the quietest corners of life, we can find ourselves amidst the unimaginable.